Happy Family Day, everybody. Welcome to this Thamesford Lions Family Day painting session with Create with Kate. I'm going to walk you through a painting tutorial to make this really cool lion for Family Day. I've got some great friends over at the Thamesford Lions Club, and they asked me if I'd be willing to make a little video for you guys, and I'm happy to do it. So let's get started. So just really quick before we start, I wanted to show you two paintings that I've made. I'm using a really thick paper just because I don't have any canvas on hand and the stores have been closed. So if you don't have canvas, you can still paint. Thicker paper is great. It can handle the moisture in the paint really well. And if you don't have thicker paper, you can find some cardboard, a piece of wood, any sort of firm surface. And if it's not already white to begin with, you can start by making a coat of white paint ahead of time and let it fully dry before you start. And you might need a couple of coats if you want it to be a little bit more vibrant white. So I just wanted to show you before we start that even though these paintings are a little bit different, the colors turned out differently. I took a bit of a different approach with the colors in the main, that they both look really great, even though they're a little bit different. So yours is probably going to be a bit different than mine too, because we are all unique artists and it will turn out a bit differently, but don't be discouraged. It'll come together in the end, and I have faith in you that you're going to be able to pull this off. So let's start with a pencil. We're going to start by carving out some of the space on this surface to make our lion ahead of time. So when you're using your pencil, you don't want to push hard because the lines will then show up once you're painting. We want them to be there so we can use them as a guide, but we want them to be nice and light. So we're going to start by finding the middle of our canvas. So from top to bottom, we want to find about the halfway point, and from side to side, that's about where we're sitting. So I'm going to come to about here. Maybe when you find that middle point, maybe just inch a little bit down from there. So I don't want to be too high up. So I'm going to make that mark there. And then from that mark to the top mark, I want you to find the middle. So it's about right there. Okay, so I'm going to make another mark right there. So I've basically divided this top part in half. That's going to be the top and bottom of the lion's head. The lion's head is a bit of a circle, but notice how it's a little bit flatter on the top, and then it's going to come out and kind of meet its widest point down here, kind of round and back up. So I'm going to start making that now. So a little bit flatter on the top, and then it's going to come out a bit wide, come around for the chin, back around and back up. So if your lines aren't exactly where you want them, that's the great thing about pencil. You can sort of play with them a bit till you're happy with them, and then you can always erase anything that you don't want. Okay, anything that's not going to work for you. Then what I want you to do is make the ears. So on either side of sort of that flat top, you're going to make a circle on each side. And the circle is stuck to the side of the head, so it's going to have a bit of a flat part here, but the rest of it is kind of a round circle. Okay? And then the next thing I want you to do is look at the top of the head and the top of your canvas or paper, whatever your surface is. And I want you to go about halfway up, halfway in between. So from here to here, I'm going about halfway in between, and I've set that as sort of my distance. Now, if you want it to be a little bit taller, you can. You probably don't want it any shorter. But what I'm setting in this mark is how big is the mane going to be? Okay, because then I'm going to draw just a gentle light line all the way around to mark out. This is the line that basically I don't want my background to go past this line, because this is the line where the background ends and the white paper will be left for the mane to be painted. Then what I want you to do is come on down to the bottom, and we're going to draw a couple of guidelines for the body of the lion. So you don't want your body to start out wider than the face. Imagine underneath this mane here, imagine that the neck of the lion will come through, and then it'll come out for the shoulders and then down for the body here. And on this side, it'll sort of come out But this side I'm going to make it come out a little bit further, imagining that we're seeing a little bit of the back and that sort of back hip of the lion here. It's kind of a cartoony lion, so we don't need to worry too much about the details, but that kind of a shape is going to give it a realistic appearance. So the next thing I want you to do is take your eraser and just have a look around at some of the lines you've made. Any of them that you don't need, you want to get rid of. And the ones that you do need, gently rub your eraser over them if they're a little bit on the dark side, just to lighten them a bit. You want to still be able to see those lines, because that's what's going to help you paint your shape. But you don't want them to be so dark that when you get painting, they're going to be really noticeable. Okay? So I've done a bit of work here on mine. I can still see them. I hope you can see them through the camera. But they've gotten a little bit lighter. Just sort of get rid of some of that eraser dust around the canvas. So next I'm going to jump over and get started with my paintbrushes. So I have a tiny, a square one, and then sort of a pointy medium brush here. So I'm going to start by putting all three of them in the water. That's a good spot to keep them when you're not painting, but just be sure that every time you take a paintbrush out of the water that you dry it on the napkin before you use it. Okay, and also you're going to be ready to use your paint. So what I have here is I've set it up so that I have my colors organized for how I'm going to make my painting. And I've used multiple dots of the same color where I'm going to be mixing them and then I need them clean for different parts. So I have black, red, and yellow here with a blob of white, and that's what I'm going to use to make the color of the lion's fur. And then I have red, yellow, blue, and 2 more dots of white to work through the background and all the bright colors in the mane. So this is sort of what I've got myself set up with here. And I do have some extra paint on the side if I'm needing more of a certain color as I go. So the next part we're going to do is mix up the color of the lion. So I'm going to take out kind of this medium brush. You're going to want something that's medium, and this one is not square, it's the pointy one. And I'm going to start mixing up to make this brown. So if you see in my 2 different paintings here, the color brown that I made is a little bit different in each painting, and yours is going to be different than mine, and the one I make right now is going to be different again. The main thing is that it looks enough like the color of a lion that that it'll work. So what I want you to do is take a little bit of black, just move it over, and I kind of just roll my brush to get that paint off of my brush and onto the paper. And then I'm going to take a bigger piece of red, and then an even bigger piece of yellow. And really gently, I'm going to start mixing those together. I want to keep my paint in as much as a pile as possible, and I don't want to mix it so hard that it all gets shoved down into the paper plate. If your paint surface is also made of paper, that paper will absorb the liquid out of your paint and it'll dry out really quick. So as you're mixing this, it'll be really hard to tell if you've made brown or not, because it's going to be quite dark. And it's not until you start adding the white that you'll see what color you're working with. So I'm twisting my brush to get some of that paint off because I don't want this super gooey with paint. And I'm going to come over to this blob of white and take a big scoop right off the edge of it. If you notice, I'm taking that paint off the edge, not out of the middle, so that this side of it's gooey with brown, but this side is still just white. So if later I want some lighter white paint, I can go right to that side and it's still uncontaminated and ready to go. So I'm actually pretty happy with this color. If you find that it's a little bit too red, add more yellow. If it's a little too yellow, you can add more red. You can add a touch of black, but you want to be careful not to add too much black. So we're going to start, I just noticed some water on there, so I was just drying it off a bit. We're going to start by tracing the outline of our lion's face. It helps if you can hold your paintbrush like a pencil and point the tip of the brush in the direction of the outside edge. What that what that does is it gives you good control, and a good way to carry on that control is to rotate your canvas as needed so that your hand is able to point the brush towards that outside edge at all times. I'm left-handed. Many of you are probably right-handed, so it'll look a little bit different for you than what you might be seeing on your screen. But that's the idea, is that the tip of the brush faces that outside edge. You don't want to be coming at it from the outside. You want to be coming at it kind of from the inside there. So once you get that outside edge painted nice, then we're going to go ahead and fill it in. If you see any blobs of paint on your lion's head, you want to make sure that you smooth those out and cover the canvas or painting surface with them. Once you start seeing that white speckling showing through, that means you don't have enough paint on your brush. So it's kind of a fine dance between too much paint and not enough. You want enough paint on your brush that it'll fully cover, but you don't want so much that it's globby, because those globs will take a long time to dry. So the next thing I do before I'm going to head down to the body is I'm going to put in some of these lighter details into my lion's face. These lighter pieces inside the ears, the bridge of the nose, and the mouth. So what I'm going to do is, with this brush, it still has that brown on it. I'm going to take a little bit of white, and just in a separate pile, I'm just going to sort of dab into that white. Do you see what's happening? The brown that was in my brush is mixing into that white, and it's just making a brown, that's much lighter than this color, but it's still the same shade. So I'm going to come up here to the ear and just pull a few strokes right in the middle. Leave the brown all the way around the outside edge. You're just sort of like if you were putting a donut hole in the middle on both ears. Then the next thing you're going to do is down the bridge of the nose. I'm still going to use this brush, but if you're finding this tricky, you can switch over to the tiny brush where you have a bit of a smaller amount of bristles and paint on your brush. I don't have a huge glob on my brush, and that will help to be able to make these marks. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to come to the top of the head and come down just about this far, and that's going to be the top of the bridge of the nose. And as I come down through the center of the face of the lion, it's like making a triangle, except it's not a very wide triangle, and it's not pointy on the top. It's just kind of pointy on the bottoms. So that is the shape. So you want to come down about that far from the top, and you're still leaving a fair amount of space at the bottom. And when you get to the part where it finishes, we then want to put a sideways oval underneath it. So that oval is going to come pretty close, so just below our triangle shape. And it's going to come pretty close to the bottom, but don't paint right over that dark edge at the bottom. And it's an oval length, widthwise this way. So it's like a circle that's been stretched this way, a little bit wider. So I'm just taking that lighter brown paint and I'm going to fill that in like that. And then the next thing I'm going to do is hop down and fill in the body. So I'm not going to wash out my brush. I'm just going to come on back over to this darker brown, and I'm going to start by doing those outside edges with this dark brown. Hopefully you made enough paint at the beginning to have enough brown to fill in your lion. If you didn't, it's not a big deal, because as you're starting to run out of paint, you can always take a little bit of white and mix it in. The white is just going to make a slightly lighter version of the same color, and that will allow for you to get a bit more volume of paint to sort of finish off this area. And if you keep the outside edges darker and use the white to sort of make more paint as you get towards the center, what it'll end up doing is sort of giving your line a bit of a rounded effect. That's kind of the happy accidents that happen in painting. You know, sometimes it's because you've run out of paint. But as you use that trick of using white to make a bit more, you get a better effect with your painting. I'm not going to paint right down to the bottom of my paper because when I'm done, I'm going to cut off a strip at the bottom here. Okay, so, but if you're painting on a canvas or you're painting on a surface that you're not going to cut off the bottom, you'll want to take this right down to the bottom, right down to the edge. So I'm now going to take out my teeny tiny brush out of the water. Very first place I go is to my napkin, dry it off, get that water out. And I'm going to take some black paint and start doing some of the details on the face of the lion. What you want to remember is if you have a lot of paint on your brush, you're going to have less control over the marks you make. So sometimes it's helpful to kind of dab your brush on a plate so that you can get a little bit of that paint off. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to make the two eyes. So they're going to be dots on either side of the top of the nose. See how small I made them compared to what this guy is? You can always make them bigger, but it's really hard once you've got that black paint on there to make them smaller. So as you are making these marks, just keep that in mind. When you're done your two eyes, well, this one feels like it needs a little bit more. When you're done those two eyes, you're going to take that little bit of black paint again, and we're going to go from one side to the other of the bottom of your nose piece. Okay, and then what you're going to do is we're going to come down and make a triangle. But do you notice the triangle only comes down a little bit? It's not a very deep triangle. And that's going to be the nose of our lion. And then even less paint on our brush. I've just got the tiniest little bit. I'm going to very carefully, barely touching, the tip of the brush just barely touches the surface that I'm painting on. And I'm going to start from that middle bottom point of the nose, and I'm going to make a little line going down. And then I'm going to make a little bit of a smile. If you want that line to be thin, you want to make sure that you're not pushing hard into your painting surface. If you barely touch the surface, it'll make a thin line. If you really push into the surface, it'll make a really thick line. And if you have a really big blob of paint on your brush, then it also makes a thicker line. So a little bit of paint on your brush, barely touching the surface, you can get a pretty nice controlled thin line. So, pretty good. We've got the lion's head, body, all the features on the face done. We're going to leave the mane for now, and we're going to work on our background. So I decided for this background to do a kind of frosty, wintry scene because that is when we celebrate Family Days in February. Also, the sort of teal turquoise color is my absolute favorite. And I find that it lends itself well to frosty, snowy days. So I'm going to hop back over to this medium-sized brush. You don't want to use the teeny tiny one for this. You want something that's going to hold a fair amount of paint. So the first thing I'm going to do is mix up some turquoise for the background. So I'm going to be using blue, a little bit of yellow, and eventually using a fair amount of white. So I'm going to start by scooping a few piles of blue away from my blue pile because I'm still going to want some blue for later. So I've brought it over here and I just twisted my brush to get that paint off there. And then I'm going to go to the yellow and I'm just going to go right to the outside edge of it to get a good poke in there. You don't want as much yellow as you've had blue because then you will make what color? Green. So we want to have enough blue in there to keep it turquoise and not green. Now, you can't tell what color it is. It's really hard to see. Why? Because it's so dark. So I'm going to go to the edge of my white pile, scoop in, grab some white, and start putting that white in. When you put the white in, then you can go, oh, okay, oh, that's so pretty. I don't really worry about having it perfectly mixed because the background isn't a perfectly flat color. So this turquoise is a little bit more greeny than this one. This one's a little bit more blue, but I like it, so I'm just going to go with it. So the first thing I'm going to do, when we're making this mane, we want the background of the mane to be really white. And then where the mane ends, we want it to be very, very, very light turquoise and then get into darker turquoise. So the first thing I'm going to do, because what I have on my brush is the darker turquoise, I'm not going to start at the edge. I'm going to go out from the edge into my canvas and go around my lion's mane all the way around. Go back and forth with your brush till you've sort of gotten all the paint off your brush. Then, while this is all still wet, you have your brush here. It doesn't have much paint on it, but it still has that turquoise on there. Go to your white, take a scoop of white, and come on back to just inside. So this is the edge of my mane. This is my dark line. And I'm using white paint to now start filling in between. Make sure you go in the direction of all the way around with your white paint. And see what's happening there is because that turquoise is still wet, if you go over it with your brush, it'll start to blend in. So, well, the only thing I poked my brush into was white. The color that I'm seeing on my canvas now is sort of a lighter turquoise. I'm going to take that color, that lighter turquoise, I'm going to actually go right down the outside edge of the body of my lion, just so that as I'm going around with the mane, I won't accidentally, because you don't want your background to paint into your surface of your lion. So I'm going to go around one more time, making it even lighter. And because I have less turquoise in my brush than before, when I pick up the white this time, it's getting even lighter. If yours isn't getting light enough, if you're still having a lot of turquoise showing up, that means that you still have a lot of paint in your brush. So all you have to do is take your brush, put it on your napkin, pinch your napkin over, wiggle it, squeeze it through. Look at all that paint I got out of my brush. My brush still has a bit of turquoise on it, but not much. If you then take the white paint and go around just painting lightly, then what you'll find is it'll stay a lot lighter. Hopefully that helped. So now I want to paint the rest of my background. So here, here, down here, down here. So I'm going to go back over to that darker turquoise. And I'm going to start filling in these outside edges. Now, if you made lots first time around, then you won't have any problem having enough paint to fill in all these edges. If you're running out of paint, what's the trick to making more that matches? Add a bit of white. By adding white, it'll be lighter, but it'll at least be the same color. So I just did it there to show you, I still have a bit of turquoise, but I just did it there to show you kind of what that'll look like. And ultimately, those sort of waves of lighter patches, as long as you're going around in that sort of circle of the mane to complete your background, then I think it's going to look really great. So again, I'm going to take the bottom off my canvas, my paper later, so I'm not going right down, but if you're painting on a canvas or a piece of board, then you'll want to take it all the way to the bottom. Okay. So now I'm going to throw that brush in the water, and I'm going to take out my square brush. So the square brush, if you don't have a square brush, you can use a teeny tiny brush. But the square brush, the next piece I'm going to do are these snowflakes, these bigger snowflakes here. Okay? So I'm going to use just a little bit of white paint. So make sure wherever you get your white from, it's still kind of clean paint, just a little bit. and I'm sort of painting on my plate here to make it nice and just a little bit on the brush. And I want you to pick maybe 3 or 5 spots to put a little cross. So barely touch. I'm just going to sort of stamp it and pull it and then make it into an X, and then go this way and then go that way. So there's one. We'll put one up here. Try really hard to not just put them in the 4 corners. Your brain is going to want to try to make it organized. You have to fight your brain and try to make it random, because snow does not fall in an organized manner. Snow falls a little bit more at random. So I did 2 close together, one here, one up there. So this one maybe I'll do kind of here. Then I'm going to switch over to my tiny brush to do all the little dabs of snow, the tiny ones. You can do this 2 ways. You can use this end, or you can use this end. I'm going to use this end. The nice thing about this end is if you can go a lot faster, because when you're using the brush, if the brush hits the canvas and bends, it makes a big blob. But this one, it can only make as big of a blob as you have paint on your brush. So you can dab it in and just sort of poke, poke, poke. Try to spread some of them out and put some of them close together. You want to make them random enough that they look like nature and not look like wallpaper. They don't look like your polka dot socks or something else that's in a kind of organized pattern. So when you're done doing those, now this next part is up to you. You can also put them right at the tips of your big snowflakes. You can put a little dot at the end of each line. Kind of makes them a little bit more fancy. But if you like them the way they look without the dots at the end of them, that's fine too. I can hear the snowplow going by. Okay, so when you're done that, because I use that into my paintbrush, I'm just going to wipe it off and put my paintbrush back in. So now the lion's face is done, the body is done, the background is done with all the snowflakes, and all that's left to do is the mane, and I'm going to let this dry for a minute or 2 before I get started on it. So now that the background is nice and dry, I'm going to start to fill in the mane with some nice colors. So the original one that I made, I kind of used rainbow colors to go around, and in this one I picked some different colors that I liked and used those. So as you can see, it doesn't matter what colors you use, it can work and look great. So this is a chance for you to customize your painting so that it's a reflection of your favorite colors, what you like, maybe match it to a special place in the house where you're hoping to hang it, or if you're making this for a gift for someone, you can pick colors that remind you of that person or you think that they would enjoy. So this is a great chance to kind of take some creative license and make it your own. So you can use either the teeny tiny brush. What I'm going to use is a square brush. I find this a lot easier because it holds more paint. And what you want to do is sort of imagine the very center of your lion's face right from the circle, and imagine that being a straight line out to the outside edge. So when you're making your lines, you're going to want to, don't paint over the face, but where you start it within this ring, you're going to want it to be like you're carrying the line through to as if it were to touch the center. And what's going to end up happening is it's going to be almost like spokes on a bicycle wheel, that the lines are going to always line up to hit the center. So we're always going to be imagining that line carrying through to a center point. So for this one, what colors am I going to make for this one? Whenever you're mixing your colors, make sure that you're using areas within the paint that are not contaminated with other colors. So, and as your colors are hitting or overlapping onto that turquoise a bit, you want to have a little bit of white in your color to let the color be vibrant and sit on top of any little bit of turquoise that's coming in from the background. So I'm going to start with kind of like a pink color. So I'm going to take some red and some clean white, and I'm going to add a touch of yellow. I want to make it really kind of vibrant. So I'm going to start with one right at the top, and I'm going to imagine it going right to that line in the center. I'm going to leave a space, another one, leave a space. And I'm just always imagining that line connecting to that center part in my lion. So the bigger the gap you leave between your colors, the more colors you'll probably need to complete your lion. And the closer together you make your lines, the less number of different colors you will have in your painting. So I've now added more yellow and more white, to my color, because now I'm interested in making a color that's very similar, but much lighter and a little bit peachier. So that's sort of a trick that I like to use sometimes in making these colors look really nice together. It's nice to have just a lighter version of the same color. Also, I don't like making it with a pattern, so I don't necessarily put the lighter one right beside the darker one all the way around. These two I did. This one I put it on the opposite side. Maybe here I'll put one in between. Here I'm not putting one next to it at all. So by mixing it up a bit, you have a little bit less pressure to sort of fit them all in just so. If you are making a similar color, just lighter or a little bit, one way or the other, then you can just add more paint to it. But anytime you're switching to make a different color, give your brush a good wash out. You don't want different colors in there. You could end up, as you're mixing it, making something that you don't like. So now I'm going to jump over and I think I'll do some blue. So I'm going to use blue, but again, like always, I'm going to add a little bit of white to it. I'm leaving a little bit of white space in between my stripes as I go around. I ran out of paint, so I'm mixing up a bit more. If it's not the exact same color, hey, who cares? We've got lots of different colors. This is going to be a bit of a crazy, busy, wild lion's mane, and it's okay that it doesn't all match. So as you start to go around from there, then you're going to want to figure out the rest of your colors. That one was a little bit lighter. So is that one, but that's okay because I'm starting to run out of space, and I'm going to wash it off, and I'm going to think about my last couple of colors to finish this out. So now I'm just going to be deciding on the final colors to finish off my lion, and then it is going to be all done. So I hope you guys have had a fun time painting a lion with me and enjoying some virtual activities while we kind of navigate through this very different family day than what we had last year. And hopefully we'll be back to celebrating family day together with the Lions at the arena and all the fun activities that they organize for us every year. So thanks again for hopping on and doing this painting with me. And I would love to see how your paintings turned out. So if you want to have a picture taken of them and get them uploaded to the Facebook page, that would be really cool to see how everybody's lions turned out and the different main colors and approaches that you guys took to creating a lion with the Thamesford Lions. Thanks again. Bye, guys.